Ethan, why are you like this? Why did you stop?
I didn't.
There are moments in life that pass so quietly. We don't recognize them as moments at all. They don't announce themselves. They don't demand attention. They simply happen, and then they stay. Ethan Cole believed he understood his. For more than 30 years, he lived with a version of the past that made sense. A version that allowed him to grow older, to move forward, to sleep at night. It was a simple story, carefully shaped, repeated often enough to feel true, that what happened was an accident, that he was just a child, that there was nothing more he could have done. But some memories don't disappear when they're buried. They wait. They listen. And when the noise of life finally quiets down, they find a way back. At exactly 2:17 a.m., in a room filled with darkness and familiar silence, Ethan woke with the sudden certainty that something inside him had stopped agreeing. Not loudly, not violently, just enough to ask a question he had avoided for decades. Why? Ethan Cole lived alone, and nothing about his life drew attention. His apartment sat on the third floor of a quiet building, the kind that people passed every day without noticing. The hallway lights were always on. The walls were clean. The neighbors kept to themselves. No one lingered long enough to ask questions. Ethan preferred it that way. At 42, his days followed a steady pattern. He woke at the same time each morning. He prepared the same breakfast. He left for work without rushing and returned home without detour. His job paid well enough, required little conversation, and ended on time. There were no photographs on the walls, no framed memories. The furniture had been chosen for function, not comfort. Everything unnecessary had been removed gradually, until the apartment felt neutral, easy to move through, easy to ignore. He spoke to people when required. He nodded to neighbors. He exchanged short greetings with coworkers. Nothing more. His evenings were predictable. Dinner, dishes, a short walk if the weather allowed. Television left on more for background noise than interest. By midnight, the apartment would settle into silence. Sleep usually came easily. That night, it did not. Ethan lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, waiting for his thoughts to slow. The ceiling fan turned above him at a steady pace. One blade made a faint clicking sound each time it completed a rotation. He had noticed it months ago. He had not fixed it. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed blue. 2:16 a.m. Ethan closed his eyes. At 2:17 he heard the voice. It did not come from the hallway. It did not come from the walls. It did not sound external at all. The sentence arrived whole, already formed, as if it had been waiting for the right moment to surface. It said only one thing. Not loudly, not urgently, just clearly. Ethan's eyes opened. He did not sit up immediately. His body remained still, as if waiting for confirmation that something had actually happened. He listened carefully, separating familiar sounds from unfamiliar ones. The fan, the distant traffic, nothing else. The room looked unchanged. After several seconds, he exhaled and sat up. There was no rush of fear, no spike of adrenaline, only a mild confusion, the kind that followed a sudden waking thought. Ethan checked the clock. 2:17. He stood and walked through the apartment. The bathroom was empty, the kitchen undisturbed, the front door locked. Nothing suggested intrusion. Back in the bedroom, he sat on the edge of the bed and considered what had happened. The sentence had been specific, but not threatening. It did not accuse him of anything. It did not explain itself. It did not ask for a response. Ethan concluded what made the most sense. Stress. He had been working longer hours recently, sleeping less. The mind, he knew, was capable of producing vivid thoughts in the space between wakefulness and sleep. A stray idea could surface and feel louder than it actually was. He had experienced similar things before. Not voices exactly, but sharp thoughts that arrived uninvited. This felt no different. Ethan lay back down and closed his eyes. Sleep came eventually. The next morning followed its usual course. Ethan showered, dressed, and left the apartment on schedule. He drank his coffee standing at the kitchen counter. He checked his phone for messages he did not expect to receive. At work, he completed his tasks efficiently. He responded to emails with brief, neutral replies. During lunch, he sat alone and scrolled through news articles without absorbing much of what he read. At no point did he think about the voice. That evening, he prepared dinner and watched a program he would not remember later. He washed his dishes and turned off the lights in the same order he always did. When he went to bed, he noticed the fan again. The clicking remained. He did not adjust it. Ethan fell asleep without difficulty. At 2:17 a.m., the voice returned, the same tone, the same cadence, the same sentence. Ethan woke more quickly this time. He felt irritation before fear. He sat up and rubbed his face, already preparing explanations. Fatigue could cause repetition. The brain, once fixated on a pattern, often reinforced it unconsciously. The fact that it was happening again did not mean it was significant. Still, he checked the apartment. Again, nothing. Back in bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling longer than before. The voice did not repeat itself. It did not linger. It had appeared, spoken once, and disappeared. The silence afterward felt ordinary. Ethan told himself he would mention it to his doctor if it continued. He had no reason to think it would. Morning came. The day unfolded. And the following night, at 2:17 a.m., the voice came back. This time, Ethan did not sit up right away. He lay still and waited. The sentence did not change. The tone did not shift. There was no emotion attached to it. No anger, no sadness, no urgency. Just information. Ethan opened his eyes and looked at the clock. 2:17. He sighed and turned onto his side. The repetition annoyed him now, not because it frightened him, but because it interrupted his sleep. He considered adjusting his schedule, going to bed earlier, reducing screen time, cutting caffeine completely. This was a physical problem, he decided, a biological response to exhaustion. He would fix it. Over the next few days, Ethan made small changes. He exercised in the evening. He avoided television before bed. He reduced his coffee intake and replaced it with water. Nothing changed. The voice continued to appear at the same time, every night. It never said more than one sentence. It never responded to his thoughts. It never varied. Ethan did not speak back. He did not feel compelled to. Instead, he treated it like an inconvenience, something to be managed rather than understood. During the day, his life remained unchanged. He completed his work. He exchanged minimal conversation. He returned to his quiet apartment. If the voice had affected him, there was no outward sign. But at night, when the apartment settled and the fan resumed its steady rotation, Ethan found himself awake earlier, anticipating the moment. 2:17. The sentence arrived as expected. Ethan opened his eyes and stared into the darkness. This time he felt something different. Not fear, but tension. A subtle tightening, like the awareness of a sound just beyond the range of hearing. He waited for it to continue. It did not. The voice remained limited, contained. Ethan exhaled slowly and closed his eyes again. Whatever this was, he decided, it did not require immediate attention. It could wait. For now, he would continue as he always had. And so he did. By the fifth night, the timing no longer felt coincidental. The voice arrived every night at exactly 2:17 a.m. It did not change its sentence. It did not change its tone. It did not stay longer than a few seconds. But it no longer skipped days. Ethan began waking before it happened. He would lie still in the dark, aware of the ceiling fan above him, aware of the weight of the blanket, aware of the clock glowing faintly beside the bed. His eyes would drift to the numbers without conscious intent. 2:15, 2:16. At 2:17, the sentence would surface. Ethan never responded. He did not argue with it. He did not acknowledge it aloud. He simply waited for it to end. Afterward, sleep became difficult. He would remain awake longer than usual, his mind alert in a way that felt unnecessary. By morning, he felt unrested but functional. He had known worse fatigue during busy work periods. This felt manageable. At first. By the end of the week, the fatigue began to show itself in small ways. Ethan misjudged time. He arrived early to meetings and left later than intended. He reread emails before sending them, not because they were complex, but because his attention drifted more easily. He grew impatient with interruptions. When coworkers spoke longer than necessary, he felt irritation rise quickly, without reason. He kept his responses short to avoid revealing it. At home, his routines began to tighten. He exercised more frequently, extending his evening walks until his legs felt heavy. He adjusted his diet, eliminating coffee entirely and replacing it with water and herbal tea. He shut off screens an hour earlier than before. None of it changed the nights. The voice continued to appear at 2:17, precise and unyielding. Ethan began tracking his sleep without meaning to. He noted the nights when he fell asleep easily and the nights when he didn't. He paid attention to what he ate, how much he moved, how long he stayed awake before bed. He looked for patterns. There were none. The voice did not respond to his efforts. It did not arrive earlier. It did not arrive later. It did not care. 2 weeks after it began, Ethan scheduled a doctor's appointment. He described his symptoms carefully: insomnia, fatigue, difficulty concentrating. He avoided mentioning the voice directly, choosing instead to describe it as intrusive thoughts during sleep transitions. The doctor listened, took notes, and ordered routine tests. Blood work came back normal. Heart rate normal, blood pressure slightly elevated, but within reason. Stress, the doctor said. Lack of sleep, nothing alarming. Ethan accepted the explanation without resistance. He had expected nothing else. Still, the nights continued. The voice never escalated. It did not grow louder or more aggressive. That constancy, more than anything else, began to wear on him. It was difficult to ignore something that behaved with such discipline. By the third week, Ethan felt tired in a way that sleep alone could not fix. He woke with tension in his jaw and shoulders. His thoughts felt compressed, less flexible. He found himself staring at nothing for brief stretches, his attention narrowing without warning. At work, he made a minor mistake. Nothing serious, but noticeable. His supervisor asked if everything was all right. Ethan said yes. The answer came automatically. That evening, instead of returning directly home, Ethan made another appointment, this time with a psychologist. The office was quiet and deliberately neutral. Soft lighting, neutral colors, no windows facing the street. Ethan sat in the chair across from the therapist and explained what had been happening. He spoke plainly. He mentioned the recurring wake-ups, the fatigue, the sense of pressure that followed him through the day. When he mentioned the voice, he did so without emphasis, describing it as something his mind produced at a consistent time. The therapist did not interrupt. When Ethan finished, the room remained quiet for several seconds. The therapist did not suggest a diagnosis. He did not ask about Ethan's childhood. Instead, he asked one question, delivered evenly and without judgment. Was there something Ethan had been avoiding thinking about? The question did not land immediately. Ethan considered it the way one considers a technical inquiry, logically, without emotion. He scanned his recent weeks for stressors, deadlines, relationships, financial concerns. Nothing stood out. He said so. The therapist nodded, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. He suggested they continue meeting and ended the session without offering conclusions. Ethan left with no prescriptions and no explanations. The question followed him anyway. Was there something he was avoiding? That night, Ethan went to bed earlier than usual. He lay still, eyes open, listening to the fan. 2:16. He waited. At 2:17, the voice appeared. Ethan closed his eyes tightly this time, as if the physical act might contain it. It did not. The sentence arrived, unchanged. Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose. He did not feel fear. He felt pressure, the sense that something was being held in place by force rather than choice. Over the next few days, the question began to intrude into ordinary moments. While brushing his teeth, while standing in line at the grocery store, while waiting for an elevator. Was there something he was avoiding? Ethan did not search his memory deliberately. He did not sit down and reflect. Instead, he found himself steering away from certain thoughts without knowing why. When his mind drifted backward, he redirected it forward. When a familiar street name surfaced, he dismissed it. The avoidance was subtle but consistent. The voice did not comment. It continued to arrive at 2:17. Ethan stopped trying to fix his sleep. He stopped adjusting routines and tracking behaviors. The effort itself had become tiring. Instead, he endured the nights and managed the days as best he could. Outwardly, nothing appeared wrong. Inwardly, the strain accumulated. By the end of the month, Ethan felt as though he was carrying something heavy without knowing what it was. A weight that did not crush him, but did not leave him either. The voice did not demand his attention. It did not ask him to remember anything. It simply existed. And in its quiet persistence, it made one thing increasingly clear. Whatever Ethan was avoiding was still there. Waiting. Ethan decided to go back without announcing it to anyone. There was no clear moment of decision, no dramatic shift. The thought simply remained long enough to become unavoidable. By the end of the week, he had taken time off work, packed a small bag, and left the city early in the morning. The drive took less than 2 hours. The highway thinned as he moved farther out, buildings giving way to open stretches of road and low, familiar landmarks. He drove without music, his attention fixed forward, his hands steady on the wheel. He did not think about the voice. It did not appear during the drive. That absence registered more than he expected. The town looked smaller than it had in his memory. The main street remained intact. Same layout, same storefronts, some updated, others unchanged. A diner still sat on the corner near the traffic light. The grocery store had a new sign, but the parking lot followed the same uneven slope. Ethan parked near the edge of town and stepped out of the car. The air felt different here. Not cleaner, not fresher, just heavier, as though it carried more weight than the city ever had. His parents' house stood on a quiet street lined with mature trees. The paint was newer. The roof had been replaced. Someone else lived there now. Ethan did not approach the door. He stood on the sidewalk across the street and observed it from a distance, taking in the details without attaching meaning to them. He noted the condition of the windows, the position of the mailbox, the sound of wind moving through leaves overhead. There was no emotional surge, just recognition. He walked away after a few minutes. The neighborhood followed the same grid he remembered. Short blocks, modest houses, driveways that sloped slightly downward. Children's bicycles leaned against fences. A basketball hoop stood crooked at the end of one driveway. Ethan walked slowly, allowing his pace to match the environment. He passed streets where he had once spent entire afternoons. He recognized the curve of sidewalks and the spacing between houses. Everything felt intact, preserved by routine rather than memory. Yet the familiarity did not bring comfort. Instead, it created a subtle tension, an awareness without an object. As he walked, Ethan noticed how often his attention shifted away from certain directions. At one intersection, he slowed unconsciously, his steps shortening before he realized it. He stopped and checked his phone, pretending to read a message that did not exist. He continued on a different street. The avoidance felt automatic, not deliberate. Ethan resumed walking, passing a small park with worn benches and a patch of grass that had never fully recovered. The swing set had been replaced, but the spacing remained the same. A few children played nearby, their voices carrying briefly before fading. Ethan did not stop. He kept moving, aware of a pressure in his chest that did not rise to the level of discomfort, but did not leave him either. The street appeared ahead gradually. It was narrower than the others, with fewer houses and less traffic. The sidewalk dipped slightly near the middle, following the contour of the road. Ethan slowed again. This time, he did not redirect himself immediately. He stood still, facing the street, his body tense in a way he could not explain. There was nothing remarkable about it. No obvious markers, no visual cues demanding attention. Yet something in him resisted stepping forward. He did not remember why. That absence of memory felt deliberate. Ethan took a step closer and felt the pressure increase. His breathing became shallow, controlled. He scanned the area, searching for something concrete that might justify the reaction. There was none. The street remained quiet. A car passed in the distance. Leaves shifted along the curb. Ethan stopped. He did not cross. Instead, he turned and walked back the way he had come, his pace quicker now, his posture rigid. He told himself nothing. He did not ask questions. He returned to the car and drove back to the house he was staying in for the night, a small rental near the edge of town. That evening passed without incident. Ethan ate a simple dinner and sat in silence, the television off, the lights dimmed. He felt tired but alert, as though his body was bracing for something that had not yet arrived. When he went to bed, he noticed the absence again. No voice. The clock read 2:17. Nothing happened. Ethan lay awake longer than he had in weeks, listening to unfamiliar sounds, the settling of the building, the occasional car passing outside. The silence felt intentional. The next morning, he returned to the street. This time, he parked closer. He stepped out of the car and stood at the corner, allowing himself to remain still. He did not attempt to recall anything. He did not search his memory. He simply observed. The street looked unchanged. Sunlight fell across the pavement at an angle that made the surface uneven, highlighting small cracks and faded markings. The curb showed signs of wear. The houses sat back slightly from the road, their windows reflecting the sky. Ethan walked a few steps forward and stopped again. The pressure returned immediately. It was not panic. It was resistance. A clear signal without explanation. Ethan noticed how his body responded before his thoughts did. His shoulders tightened, his jaw set, his feet hesitated. He remained where he was for several seconds, then turned back once more. He did not feel disappointment. He felt containment, as if something had been successfully kept out of reach. Throughout the day, Ethan moved through the town without incident. He visited familiar places. He ate at the diner. He exchanged polite words with strangers who did not recognize him. The street stayed with him. That night, the voice remained absent. Ethan woke at 2:17 and stared at the ceiling, waiting. Nothing arrived. The silence did not feel like relief. It felt like restraint. By the third day, Ethan understood something without being able to articulate it. The street was not waiting for him to remember. It was waiting for him to stop avoiding it. He left town that afternoon. As he merged back onto the highway, Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror once, then returned his focus to the road ahead. The voice did not return that night, but the pressure did not lift. Whatever waited on that street had not been resolved. It had only been postponed. Ethan returned to the street in the early afternoon. The light was similar to what he remembered. Not bright, not dim. Just enough to expose details without softening them. He parked near the corner and stepped out of the car. The air was still. No wind, no movement beyond the occasional passing vehicle several blocks away. The street looked ordinary. That was what unsettled him. He walked toward the center of it, each step measured, controlled. There was no hesitation this time, no detour. He stopped where the sidewalk dipped slightly, where the road narrowed just enough to slow traffic without forcing it to stop. This was the place. The pressure in his chest returned immediately, sharper than before. He did not resist it. He did not try to redirect his thoughts. He stayed where he was. The memory did not arrive gradually. It came all at once. The ball rolled into the street. It moved with careless momentum, bouncing once before settling near the middle of the road. Bright. Out of place. The child followed. Small shoes stepped off the curb without pause, eyes fixed on the ball. No glance toward the traffic. No hesitation. A horn sounded, then another, loud, urgent, close. The street filled with noise in an instant. Engines, tires, a warning shouted from somewhere Ethan could not see. The truck appeared at the far end of the road. Too fast. Even from a distance, it was clear something was wrong. It did not slow as it approached the intersection. It did not adjust its path. The horn blared again. Ethan saw everything with exact clarity. He stood on the sidewalk, close enough to reach the child, close enough to cross the distance in a few steps. Nothing blocked his way. No fence, no parked cars, no barrier of any kind. Ethan tried to move. His body did not respond. The command registered. The intention was clear. But his legs remained locked in place, heavy and uncooperative. He shouted. The sound tore out of him, raw and uncontrolled. But it disappeared into the surrounding noise, absorbed by engines and horns. No one turned. No one reacted. Across the street, another child stood near the curb, older, taller, watching. The child did not move. Arms hung at his sides, his posture rigid, his face pale, eyes wide but unfocused. Ethan saw that child with brutal clarity. That child was him. Not the man standing here now, but the boy he had been. The one who had arrived first. The one who had been close enough. The truck closed the distance quickly. Ethan saw the driver through the windshield, eyes wide, mouth open, hands yanking at the wheel. The truck drifted slightly to one side, then corrected too late. The brakes did not catch. The child in the road looked up, not screaming, not crying, just confused. The moment lasted only seconds. Then the truck hit. The impact was heavy and final, a sound that flattened everything else. The ball bounced free and rolled toward the opposite curb, untouched. People ran into the street. Someone screamed. Hands grabbed Ethan's shoulders and pulled him backward. Voices shouted words he never remembered. What remained fixed was his hand, still empty. The memory held steady, unbroken. Ethan stood in the present, his breathing controlled, his vision clear. He did not look away. He did not flinch. He understood now why the scene had never surfaced intact. Because it did not fit the story he had told himself. He had rewritten it. He had said the truck came too fast, that there was no time, that he had tried. None of that was true. There had been time. Not much, but enough. Enough for one step forward. Enough for one hand to reach out. Enough to pull a child out of the road. He had been there. He had seen everything, and he had not moved. The fear had been real. The shock had been real, but they had not removed his ability to act. They had only delayed it. Long enough for the moment to pass. Ethan felt no surge of emotion as the realization settled. No collapse. No release. Only alignment. This was the part of the memory he had separated from the rest. The part that had been isolated and buried, preserved without alteration. The voice. Not something external. Not something new. It was the memory that had never been rewritten. The record of what actually happened. It had not returned to him. It had waited. Ethan remained on the sidewalk for several minutes, letting the street return to its present state. Cars passed. A dog barked somewhere nearby. The afternoon continued without acknowledgement. Nothing had changed. But the division inside him was gone. The memory was whole now. Ethan turned and walked back to his car. His movements were steady, deliberate. There was no urgency in them. As he drove away, he did not look back. The street did not need him anymore. What it held had been released. Ethan returned to his apartment late that night. He did not turn on the lights immediately. He stood just inside the door and listened to the quiet settle around him. The space felt unchanged. The furniture remained where it had always been. Nothing in the room acknowledged what he now carried. He placed his keys on the counter and moved through the apartment without urgency. When he reached the bedroom, the ceiling fan was already turning. The clicking sound remained. Ethan did not stop it. He lay down fully clothed and waited. At 2:17 a.m. the voice returned. It did not speak. It did not form a sentence or present a thought. It was simply there. Ethan became aware of it the same way one becomes aware of pressure in a room, an unmistakable presence without shape or sound. It did not demand attention. It did not push forward. It waited. Ethan sat up slowly. His breathing was steady. He did not feel fear or surprise. The memory from the street remained intact, clear and undisturbed. This time, he did not look for explanations. He reached for his phone and placed it on the nightstand. The screen lit briefly before dimming. He pressed record and set it down again. Ethan did not prepare what he was about to say. He did not search for the right words. He spoke only to complete the record. His voice was calm, measured, without inflection. He did not mention how young he had been. He did not speak about panic or confusion. He did not describe the noise, the truck, or the crowd that followed. Those details had already been preserved elsewhere. Instead, he stated what mattered. He acknowledged the moment, the distance, the time that had existed. He said that he could have moved. He said that he did not. The words were not emphasized. They were not repeated. They were spoken once, clearly. Ethan did not apologize. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not suggest that the outcome would have been different if circumstances had changed. He stopped the recording when there was nothing left to say. The phone went dark. The voice remained silent. Ethan waited. He lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The fan continued its slow rotation. Minutes passed without interruption. His breathing slowed, then steadied. Nothing happened. The silence did not feel empty. It felt final. Ethan stayed awake longer than usual, expecting something, a response, a shift, a release. None came. The voice did not return the following night. Ethan woke at 2:17 and checked the clock out of habit. The room remained quiet. The absence registered, but it did not bring relief. It brought clarity. The days that followed were uneventful. Ethan returned to work. He completed his tasks. He spoke when spoken to. His co-workers noticed nothing unusual. His supervisor did not ask questions. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Inwardly, there was no longer resistance. The memory did not intrude or demand attention. It remained present in the background, unchanged, unaltered. Ethan did not attempt to distract himself from it. He did not revisit it deliberately either. He allowed it to exist. On the third day, Ethan drove to the cemetery. The drive was short. The weather was neutral, overcast, but dry. He parked near the entrance and walked the rest of the way. The cemetery was quiet, the kind of quiet shaped by routine rather than reverence. Rows of headstones extended evenly across the grounds. Names and dates were carved into stone with consistent precision. Ethan found the grave without difficulty. He stood in front of it and looked down. The name was familiar. The dates were unchanged. He placed the flowers at the base of the stone and stepped back. Ethan did not speak. He did not kneel or bow his head. He stood still and allowed the silence to remain. No words felt necessary. After several moments, he turned and walked away. That night, back in his apartment, Ethan lay beneath the turning fan and listened to the sound it made. The voice did not return. Days passed, then weeks. The absence did not grow into comfort. It became a condition, something that existed without requiring interpretation. Ethan did not feel redeemed. He did not feel punished. He felt aware. The memory did not change over time. It did not soften. It did not recede. It remained exact, preserved as it had always been. The difference was that Ethan no longer pushed it aside. He no longer rewrote it. He no longer waited for it to leave. He continued his routines. He woke at the same time. He ate the same meals. He walked the same routes through the city. The structure of his life held. But the story he told himself had changed. There was no longer a version of the past that allowed for comfort. There was only accuracy. One evening, as Ethan prepared for bed, he paused in the doorway of the bedroom. The room looked the same as it always had. The fan turned. The clock glowed. He did not check the time. Ethan turned off the light and lay down. The silence held. It did not erase what had happened. It did not make it acceptable, but it no longer needed to be avoided. The silence did not undo the past. It ended the act of running from it, and that was all it was ever meant to do.